Hello friend, Shalom. Today I'm going to talk about something that happened 178 years ago, about this time of day. It was the death of Joseph Smith in Carthage, Illinois, with his brother. Two other men were there. John Taylor, I think, was shot, but survived. I think a bullet hit his watch or something. I've decided that someone needs to be a spokesman for Joseph Smith and what he stood for. So one of the things that I plan on doing is telling some of the stories of his life, trying to tell them from a more objective point of view, not an anti point of view, not an apologetics point of view, but a point of view where you really try to understand who he was and what was going on and face some of the facts. And today I'm just going to get started. So according to this website, which is typical, not just of Mormon websites, but of websites in general. What happens if I want to download this entire list as an Excel file and do something with it? So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to go about doing some of those things. And if I take the time to build such a file, I'll make it available to you. So Joseph Smith Jr. was born December 23rd, 1805 in Sharon, Vermont. Shalom for the Hebrew speakers out there. And that means he was conceived around Easter of that same year, so Easter of 1805. So I'm going to go in a little bit of a different order. No, I'll just go in the order that I currently have. Apparently the next most important thing here is 1813. I don't know if it talks about his moving around in Vermont. And 1813 is interesting because 1813, how old's Hiram? Again, I'm going to give you all these links. There's a few links that I created spontaneously. So Hiram's 5 years older. So in 1813, Hiram's only 13. Hiram went to college. He went to this Dartmouth college. And some people think that's how he found Dr. Smith. But because he's only 13 at the time, maybe he went after the family met Dr. Nathan Smith. And this is what I'm going to spend most of today on, talking about this leg operation, talk about surgery in general, and ask the question, is it holy? So in ancient Hebrew tradition, you couldn't cut yourself, whether it was a tattoo on your body or a cut. They came out of Egypt where they were doing breast enhancement surgeries, I guess. They were definitely cutting up cadavers when they would embalm them. They respected the body in Egypt, and they would put them in, the different innards into 4 jars. I question what they did with the brain. There's a bitumen out there that people were raiding tombs and mummies for, which was from what remained of what they left in the body. So whether it was the brain or the heart, those are the two things I think they left. Maybe they took the brain out through the nose. But they took out all the intestines, all the kidneys, the liver, and all that, the stomach, and they put them in 4 jars. One person says they put the stomach in 1 jar and the intestine in another. Another says they put them all in 1 jar. It's like, well, what happens if you're like John Wayne? When John Wayne died, he apparently had like 30 pounds of meat stuck in his intestines. Tangent City. There we go. So anyway, Joseph's family decides to have a surgery. And this is interesting because Alvin died because they didn't perform a surgery. Because historically, you didn't cut a body open. I was reading some old Catholic stuff from 1610, and it talks about how a woman took her belly button and cut a cross, a Greek cross on it, took out her unborn child, and sat there and held it for a while. They didn't have doctors at the time, so they called the priest, came in, and she didn't want last rites. She said she didn't know what she was doing. So the baby died, obviously, and she died. And because she cut herself, they put her in a bag and threw her in the river. A very disgraceful death. I'm going to say a gunny sack bag. I don't know. That's what they were using at the time, 1600s. And then another story from that same reading talked about how a man was either a butcher or raised pigs, and his wife was struggling to give birth, and he asked for permission from the Catholic priest and said, I know what I'm doing, to cut her open. So if we look at why Alvin died in 1823, it was because some young doctor said, here, take this, and they gave him calumet or something. And then another young doctor came and said, no, you're still sick, take this. And another doctor. And then finally an older doctor apparently showed up and said, what are you guys doing? You're killing him. And sure enough, he died. I also think of David Patton during the Battle of Crooked River, whatever it was called, Crooked Tree, 1838 war. He goes with Joseph, and on the way, he's like, Joseph, I have this feeling I'm going to die. And we don't have a lot of details, I don't think, but he gets gut shot. They take him home, and he dies a few days later. And then I think of James Garfield. James Garfield was assassinated supposedly by a Charles Julius Guiteau, who did shoot him in the gut. He was hospitalized or whatever they did back then for who knows how long, 30 days. And Alexander Graham Bell's like, oh, I'll save him. So Alexander Graham Bell invented a metal detector, went to his hospital room, turned it on, and says, beep, beep, beep. So then they take a knife, dig into him, looking for the bullet, try to get it out. A surgery. Didn't find it. Dig again, dig again. So, did Charles Julius Guiteau really kill James Garfield? Or was it Alexander Graham Bell? And, I don't know if they had bed springs with metal in the back, but maybe that's what he was detecting with his metal detector. So, surgery is a non-trivial thing. And in this perverted world we live in, we've made it commonplace. And before I continue with that, I just want to, I'll go through some of this before, but it would be nice if you could download this whole thing between 1813 and 1816. Where's the Tambora eruption that created the year without a summer of 1816 or so, I think? Where's the meteor showers of 1833 followed by Halley's Comet almost exactly 2 years later in 1835? So we need better data. We need to be able to take this data and organize it so we can find what we need more quickly, and so we don't forget it, etc. Anyway, I'm going to focus today on Joseph Smith's boyhood operation. So I went here, I found this. And so one of the things I want to share is my train of thought. So you can see I have all these tabs open. Normally what I'm going to do is just start with a blank browser and just start opening tabs and talking. But I had to set some things up today, so I had to go through and prepare a method. So what's funny, when you look at the browser data for this, it says I visited this page 9 times in less than a minute when I first hit their website, which just tells me they're probably doing a lot of redirects or something weird going on. So when I see Leroy S. Worthland, I don't know who he is, but I think of Joseph B. Worthland. Joseph B. Worthland. Is that 5-syllable thing like a requirement to be a general authority? So anyway, I clicked on that, then I clicked on this article. And so he's going to go and talk a little bit medicine-y. I don't want to pretend I'm a medical doctor. I don't play one on TV. I'm not one. But I know how to read. And so you can go through and read this. And so he explains who this Nathan Smith was. Nathan Smith was the head of a medical school called Dartmouth College, the only member of the school. Surgery was one of his focuses with alchemy. So they just lived at a different time. And then at Yale, he also studied surgery and physics or something. And so he had a wide reputation. So before I get too carried away with what he did, he probably made an incision cut on the leg. And, if you're a Christian or a Jew at the time, a cut on the leg is not as severe as cutting in the abdomen where the heart is. And, this goes back to the narrative we're told about how Jesus died is that they pierced him in the side. And so maybe that's why the Catholics couldn't cut open a body. When Alvin died, someone supposedly dug him up and cut him apart, which, again, it's kind of black magic stuff. And Joseph Smith Sr., father, exhumed or partially exhumed Alvin to make sure that they hadn't taken the body and cut him up. And so just think about what we do today. I'm a donor card signer, and I say you can cut up my body when I'm dead. And it's to help and save other people. But what are the spiritual implications there? And why do we take them so lightly? And my fundamental question for what I'm reading today is, was Joseph's surgery necessary? Did it save his life so he could restore the church? Or did the guy perform the surgery because they traveled all that way, he had certain conditions, seemed reasonable by the doctor, and the doctor could do the surgery and make a buck? That's the American way, especially in medicine. So which bones were involved? Supposedly the bone had to be drained. The hollow of the bone had to be drained. And so, because Joseph was really young at this time, he's only 8, he's probably not going to remember all of the details. But the concept of marrow in your bone, they literally sucked out the pus out of one of his bones. And so anyway, I didn't go through and read all of this. You can read this. Then the link is in the notes. This is me just kind of plowing through some data this morning on a reverence and memorial of Joseph Smith's life. And, I think this is a very valid point. Why do we perform surgeries? And if you, think about what modern medicine sells us, it's contrary to the concept of the knowledge of Jehovah will fill the world, such that if you stick your hand in a hole and get bitten by a snake, you know the remedies. And the remedies aren't an whatever they call them, an EpiPen. It's the herbs of the earth. In Joseph Smith's, I don't know if it's section 46, when he says, if you have faith to be healed by spiritual powers, you will be healed, and if not, you should use the herbs of the field. He didn't ever say surgery in the list. So anyway, the idea of surgery became mainstream as a result of this. Oh, look, Leroy S. Worthland, assistant professor of surgery at Harvard Medical School. wonder if we know any other surgeons in the Mormon Church. So I think about that. I think about what would have happened if they would use faith and herbs and not surgery. For anyone interested that knows more about medicine and medical practices, was the procedure on Spencer W. Kimball performed by Nelson, was that as risky as the narrative claims it was at the time? And then today, is that like a very simple procedure today? When I was home teaching a man, he had to have some surgical procedures, and at some point they did a full, triple, quadruple bypass. But then later he had to go do a procedure that was just another stent that took a couple hours, and I dropped him off, waited a few hours, picked him up, and took him home. So the idea of cutting open the body is very mainstay today. I think of the story of a couple that went into the hospital, wanted a natural delivery. Hospital knew they were on Medicaid. About 10 hours in, the woman asks for an epidural, so things are going to start to move. I'm not a medical doctor, so if you have opinions, put them in the comments. And the doctor comes in and says, I want you to push. So what happens when you push? What's going to happen to the baby's heart rate? What's going to happen to the mother's heart rate? It's going to naturally elevate. And then the doctor says, oh, look, there was a problem. The heart rates are elevated. Oh, by the way, I have another doctor in the other room ready to do a C-section if you give us the okay. And the difference in cost is probably $5,000 versus $25,000. And that other doctor gets paid. He's not doing anything. And it's tacit collusion. I don't think they sit down and talk about it. And so as a result, a C-section performed. Maybe it saved the baby's life. Or maybe it forever changed that woman's ability to adjust her hormones, and possibly, from what I understand, every baby thereafter is a C-section, so it's scheduled, and the doctor doesn't have to come in at 3 a.m, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So America loves C-sections. You do an analysis of the history of C-sections over time, per capita, per country. Where are the midwives? For thousands of years, children were born. Oh, the death rates were higher. Prove it to me. It seems like the death rates in Joseph and Emma's family was higher, but I want to see the data. I really do. And then, the babies are born, they inject them with all these vaccines, and then 6 months later, more vaccines. They're constantly modifying the body. And to me, this would be, as a spokesman for Joseph Smith, this would be the word of wisdom. What you put in your body determines the health of your body. The functions of inputs and outputs in your body determine your health. You want to drink coffee, drink coffee. You want to drink alcohol, drink alcohol. You just need to understand there are consequences for it. You want to smoke tobacco, smoke tobacco. You want hashish, do hashish. You just need to understand the benefits or the lack of benefits. I love what Sadhguru says about smoking marijuana. He says, you want to get dumb, smoke marijuana. So that's a word of wisdom. If you want to get dumb, ingest marijuana. And I don't know if the essential oils related to marijuana or hemp are the same as smoking it. But that's the kind of research that we should be doing. We should be doing research about the herbs of the field. And hemp is such a weird thing to me. Hemp was in ancient Egypt, was in ancient Israel, and it's illegal in the U.S. You could build houses out of it. You can make papyri out of it. So anyway, the next thing I did is, I looked in Joseph Smith's papers, they talk about, typhoid fever, complications. So then, what's typhoid fever? Symptoms include feeling tired. Does it affect the legs? This is how we should be thinking about these stories. Bone typhoid symptoms. Salmonella. So either food or contaminated water with feces. So now put yourself in Lucy Mack's shoes. She's got this young boy. Maybe she had put out some bad meat that had gone spoiled for the dogs, and this little toddler crawled up and ate it. Or, maybe they just had non-sanitary conditions related to the outhouse and water, etc. So now imagine you're a young mother and your child is oozing this stuff. I don't know if it was oozing. So this is what we should have. We should know these stories. Like, put it in perspective of what it is. So I found this research article published in 1939 talking about typhoid and paratyphoid osteomyelitis. So it talks about osteo means bones. And so one of the things he talks about in his article is he says serology is not a good predictor of whether or not you need a bone surgery. So what this concludes as we read through this article is this doctor, this great Nathan Smith, or Nathan, whatever his name was, he had no way of knowing. And you read the stories of this doctor, he would go visit different families, and sometimes he would look at the arm and say, I don't have to cut it off, or the leg. And sometimes he said he would, or sometimes he would do this hybrid bone surgery where I guess he would cut a piece of the bone, let it ooze out, maybe put a little hose or something there. I don't know what he was doing. That's what we should know. How do we not know these stories? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Put it in context. So I had to look up some of these words. Diaphysis, the shaft or central part of a long bone. And that was me researching some of this information about Joseph Smith. And so today I wanted to talk specifically about his death and think about, did that bone surgery save his life or just make him limp for the rest of his life? But regardless, the glory of God is intelligence. He learned what marrow was because he possibly had this little tube in his leg oozing out green pus. Now, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, make a video to prove me wrong. Put some comments in here. Tell me where I'm mistaken. All I can do is make logical conclusions based on the story, based on the information I have. And unless I'm corrected, that's the story I'm going to tell. And as I conclude with that thought, if Gordon B. Hinckley probably wouldn't have been prophet. He probably still would have been prophet, but Ezra Taft Benson would have had 20 years of beware of pride and the curse of the Book of Mormon. If God wanted Spencer W. Kimball to go to heaven and man, these surgeons. I've met one surgeon that I don't think's arrogant, but I wasn't meeting him in the operating room. And he's one of the best surgeons in the world for hand surgery. So a guy got in a snowmobiling accident halfway across the world, went to several doctors and eventually went to him and he fixed his hand. It's an elective procedure. Surgery is an elective procedure. You should choose to do it. And so, we always kind of frown upon, I forget which religious groups they are, about medical practices. In 1830, people weren't cutting open bodies. Alvin died in 1823. And all of a sudden we think it's correct. And the curse of the Book of Mormon is important. We still haven't figured it out. We're sitting here spinning our wheels. It's the legend of Nephi. It's obvious what the problem is. And until we overcome the problem, instead we build a ramiantum out of black walnut that Gordon had in front of his house, and we build all these temples all over the world. We got billions of dollars. And there are homeless people, and there are widows and the fatherless. Pure religion undefiled before God. There's a seething in the church, among people that belong to the Mormon culture. And that seething is a function of a organization that just cares about self-preservation, Cicero's classic argument. And that's not going to restore the knowledge of Jehovah. You have to get to work. You have to do something. So I'm going to talk a lot about Joseph Smith, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to really try to put my current take on it, and I'm open to ideas. So I've visited Carthage. It felt fine. You know, I didn't feel dark. Like, I've visited some places that feels dark. It feels like there's death there. And someone once asked me, "What do you think Joseph's doing right now?" And it's like, I think he was an unlearned man. He came into this world like a C student, and he left with a B+. Is he sitting here worrying about this world? No, that's not how the eternities work. He's probably working on something else. He's probably doing something else. He probably has the ability to check in from time to time. But given his circumstances, he had one job to do. And that's the curse of the Book of Mormon. That was his one job. If any of you lack faith, go and ask God. There was a nice article in BYU somewhere about all these first vision stories happening contemporaneously in the Northeast. So maybe God was preparing in case he died of his bone surgery thing, or in case he loved gold too much, that they're preparing some backup plans in case Joseph didn't work out. And what's interesting is, how many of us have gone in prayer and asked, lacking wisdom, for additional light and knowledge. And Joseph asked, and he gets this column of light and this great vision. And the details of the vision, I don't think we fully understand. I think more happened there than the stories will tell. All the other visions as well. I'm sure he reflected on those visions, and over time, as his maturity and understanding changed, his understanding of things changed. And that's where I don't think we fully appreciate what Joseph Smith was sent to do. Why is God talking to him? God's like, I have one, not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have one marvelous work and wonder for you to do. And that's to bring forth the legend of Nephi. We call it the Book of Mormon, but that was like the training wheels. The pinnacle was the legend of Nephi. The training wheels had 3 witnesses. The legend of Nephi had 8. It's not difficult math. 8 is greater than 3. There were probably 3 or 4 different angels. Moroni was one of them. The stories changed over time. Why did the church do that? Looking into the bosom of the angel. We need to know the actual story. Lucy Mack, I don't know if it was just Lucy, I don't know if it was Lucy Mack. I know it was, what's her name? The Whitmer mother. She's out milking the cows, and she sees the angel Nephi. He shows her the plates. She's a woman. She can't be a witness. She was probably the first witness. So I'm being facetious. She's a woman. She can't be a witness. Oh, look, the brethren finally let women be witnesses. So they're looking through the veiled glass darkly. They have no idea what's going on. They're just hanging on. The death of Joseph Smith. So Praise to the Man is a great song. This is the lyric that was supposed to go with it originally. To the poetry written by W.W. Phelps. So that brings a very different tone to Praise to the Man. So I'm speaking of the song Praise to the Man that communed with Jehovah. And it was published in the Times and Seasons from my understanding, and it got confused with some little note that Eliza R. Snow published at the same time in that same journal, so it wasn't accredited to Phelps. And what I love about this song is the ire. They had a long will the blood of the assassins be staining the fields of Illinois. And the institution of the church practicing their good neighbor policy changed the lyric, made an edit to the creative work. W.W. Phelps was upset. And then there's some interesting things about his death and the mysterious death of his brother a little time later, and the Danites and Brigham that, just raised some really interesting questions that I won't cover today. But this is what they went with, which isn't a lightweight. Isn't it amazing the technologies we have that we can, I pulled this together in half an hour. So anyway, if you choose to listen to me, I'm going to go off on tangents. Listening to that, a Scottish hymn, made me think of Alexander Ruthven. What? Who's Alexander Ruthven? What does he have to do with anything? Oh, he was hanged and quartered. He was already dead when they did this. And why did they hang and quarter him? His head was exposed in the main city, and his arms were taken to Perth. A lot of times they would take the four parts, the arm, the leg. Well, I guess the arm with the torso to the four parts, because they didn't want the family to steal the body and claim he was resurrected. But that doesn't have anything to do with Yeshua. Of course not. So Alexander Ruthven, likely, if you read the histories, likely was a member of the teenage squad in Scotland royalty. And at the time Elizabeth was Queen of England, Elizabeth liked the Ruthven family. Ruthven was a clan of Scotland that had some run-ins in with St. James, or James, and his mother, Mary. There was the Riccio conspiracy with the grandparents. These clans fought, and James owed the Ruthven family a lot of money. His death was on Tuesday, the 5th of August, because James had to go in front of the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Parliament was in his pocket, and they claimed that Alexander and his older brother, when they had gone to the University of Padua for school, had these secret papers with Greek letters written on them, and they were practicing dark magic. He's a grandfather of mine, so technically I might be a rightful king of England. Well, according to the Mormon Church, he's not, because their genealogy says he can't be because of age discrepancy. And all I can say to that is, okay. So, there was a poem called Rimor de Gauri, which was written in Icelandic to justify the actions of King James. And so anyway, I was trying to remember. Oh, I have to sign in again. I'm not going to do that on camera. Okay, so let me pause. So you can read about Alexander Ruthven a little bit. There's not a lot of information out there. There's like 10 records for him. And so the Mormons are spending all this time with genealogy work, spending all these times and resources to show God that they're working hard. You received a talent of gold. It weighed 60 pounds. You've buried it in the sand and canonized it. Nephi has to be laughing. He writes a Bible, we have a Bible. The proof is simple. The Bible is n equals 1. The Book of Mormon is n plus 1. You have two books. What's funny? The Stick of Joseph and the Stick of Judah. Is the Book of Mormon translated into the language of Judah yet? Huh, interesting. What exactly is this institution doing with your time and resource? And anyway, I'm seething within the church. They need to change. It's time for them to change. And that's why I take on the name of Nephi John. So Alexander, there's all these different people that are the same person. When I did one of the searches, it said he died a month before he had died. And it's like, come on. And somewhere here in this ability to do sources, I found this article that I had to do a Google search to find again. But he apparently had a son that lived in this place. And I was trying to figure out where that was in relation to Perthshire. I don't know if Perthshire is going to be there. So let's see if this works. I don't know. Ruthven. That's Edinburgh. So where's Perthshire? I don't know a lot about the geography of Scotland. So let's just put Perth just to get a different. Yeah. So around Edinburgh, whether it was north or whatever, this is at most 200 miles away. And this child supposedly was Alexander's son. James Trotter, the woman, I think, went to Ireland and then eventually to America. And this is a really good biography. This tells a kind of a balanced version of the story. You got the Protestant Catholic thing going on. This does mention Padua, if I recall. So what's interesting, they would have been in Padua when Galileo was there, in the area, not necessarily at the University of Padua. I think Galileo was at Pisa by that time. And on their return, they went and visited Elizabeth, which was probably death's blow. And she had an escort accompany them up to Scotland. And 6 weeks later, they were dead. He was a member of royalty. So you have these castles with all these teenagers running around. Alexander was supposedly in the bedchamber of, so he's a chamberman, I don't know what the language is, of James, King James of Scotland eventually. But he was in the bedchamber. Some possibility that they were doing homosexual acts. Or there was some participation in the Queenly Act. Queen Anne of Denmark got pregnant. Alexander and his older brother immediately leave for Italy. They come back when the first child, I think it was Charles, was born. Charles mysteriously dies at the age of 18, but they did an autopsy or whatever they did back then, and it wasn't poison. So if you think we live in a world of fake news now, you have to do the math. N equals 1, fake news today. N plus 1, fake news at the time of King James. We can learn about fake news to find truth. It's just axiomatic math. This is basic math for anyone with a math mind. And as we go on this journey, and for those of you that wish to listen to me tell these stories, it's going to be quite easy how you go about reestablishing truth. And you do it with the times and seasons. That's quite obvious. So the Ruthven clan, they had a goat with "Died Shaw" as their motto. I still don't remember what "Died Shaw" means. So for all of you Ruthven clan people, Queen Elizabeth was going to select the Gowrie House to be the next king of England. And on Tuesday, the 5th of August of 1600, so the Ruthven family was a sheriff, and they had ties to William Wallace, I believe, or William the Bruce, one of the two. I think William Wallace. And their church was called the Church of John the Baptist on their property. And the day of, 600 men on horses rode in. And the king supposedly met with the two brothers upstairs by themselves. And then he runs to the window and says, "They're trying to kill me." And then they're killed. So I think he wanted to capture them alive and, publicly execute them. I don't know that he did. I don't know what his motive would have been for that. He wanted them dead because Queen Anne was there. A public execution would have been really difficult. Like, he could have done it in Scotland, but Elizabeth's right down the road, and she's not going to allow that. She just escorted the family. So in 2019, someone posted this on one of these family ancestry websites, and I had to search a different way to find it, but I found it. And this really enlightened me about some of the stuff I was telling you about him being in the bedchamber, them being in the same castle, and so there's a link to the actual family papers, and it goes through and talks about what they did in Padua and when they were there. It's a nice read. I've been studying Alexander Ruthven since 20, 25 years. But according to the Mormon genealogy, I technically can't be related to him because the math doesn't work. So one of the things I'm going to mention is I've created a GitHub repository called Nephi John Resources. And today is the date. Praise to the man is this video. And then I created these URLs. So you can see the URLs that I created. And normally what's going to happen is I'm going to do this real time. So like these last few are not part of that. But this is me meandering. But I had to set it up today. So what I'll normally do is start with a fresh browser, nothing open, and just start to explore, finish it, make a URL list, post it on GitHub, post it on YouTube. So if you want to follow some of my logic, so today, I talked about some things. Sometimes it's hard to find again the things. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this. So constantly having to retell a story and remember a detail is difficult. So this is a way to track the evolution of my thinking as well. So Porter Rockwell was much younger than Joseph, according to this. It's a Serica. They said he was born in Massachusetts. I think they were in Palmyra when they were neighbors. And the stories that I was reading is Lucy Mack and Porter's mom would sit on the porch on Saturday nights and tell each other their dreams and try to interpret their dreams. Pretty interesting. So this was Tambora. That should be in the timeline. We need to create a timeline like a wiki that we need. An event is a function of time and place. You should put in a latitude and a longitude and a date so you can map it. I've been working on looking at the distribution of lunar and solar eclipses. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, about how you can organize thought. So if I had $1 trillion, I'm pretty sure I could create a better world. A world in a society that's built on the principles of the knowledge of Jehovah. But I can't do it alone. All I can do now is share some things This is interesting. It's interesting that that's on this page. I didn't see it before. The French Republican calendar, which is the best model to restore the times and the seasons, is to rebuild a calendar. The calendar should start on the solar equinox in spring, which varies from March 20th to March 21st or whatever. The solar equinox is in all the ancient buildings. It's like where the sun rises and sun sets, like Stonehenge and some of these other places that are really old, and some of the newer places like the temple in India, where the sunrise is perfect over this temple built in like 600 AD. And all it takes is you put a pole in the ground and follow shadows, and you can within a year know exactly where the solstice is. So when you talk about creating tropical or solar time, you need to do that. The Gregorian calendar is good, but it's not perfect. A perfect calendar is based on the idea that there's 360 degrees in a circle. And so all of these, what do I want to call them? All of these continuous function mathematicians, not discrete mathematicians, want to extend all of the days for the 365.25 days in a year. No, you start on March 21st or whenever it is, and you go in discrete steps. Right? Remember Isaiah when he talks about Ahaz's compass or shadows or steps. You go in steps. Each step has 30 days. 30 days can be divided into three, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. That's what you want to call her. So those are a decan and a pentad. Look at ancient Egypt. Look at ancient China. It was everywhere. Oh, the ancient Nordics. It's hard to find the ancient Nordics when again. Everyone has a 7-day week. What are you talking about? 7-day week wasn't invented until 100 AD. They were using the 8-day Etruscan week during the time of Yeshua, and we're supposed to believe the time and dates of the Sabbath and all that? Come on. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God said in Genesis 1, 10 times. You compare 10 and 7. I'm not going with 7. I look at my hands. How do you teach a child how to count days in a week? You got 10 fingers, and you're supposed to use 7? My 6-year-old knows better than that. So anyway, the French, for whatever reason, for about 12 years, they were able to do this. They didn't do it exactly. My proposal would be vernal equinox, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, and then you have every year 5 or 6 days of celebration. The ancient Mayans called them the days of chaos. And I believe the ancient Hebrews called them the days of celebration. So at the end of the year, they're out of time. These days are out of time. They're holy days, celebration days. They don't have to be spiritual, that you have to be tied or bound to something. But they're days of memory and memorial that God extended the days. There's 360 degrees in a circle, but we have 365.25 days in a year. And you apply the Gregorian leap year model to it, so you either have 5 or 6 celebration days. Those days are out of time. They're not part of a week. They're just celebration days. They're not an intercalendary month. They're just celebration days. And then you start again. And guess what? 10 days. So look at Nisan 14. Nisan 14 is the eve of Nisan 15. 15 is the 5th of 10 days in the week of the sun. Was the week of the mother before or after? I don't know that yet. We can figure that out. The Father, the Son, the Mother. Think about that. Times and seasons. Every month, every day, every week. We're tying it to our understanding of the divine, both male, female, and progeny. I don't know how the daughter would play in there. I haven't figured that one out yet. Very, very simple solution to a calendar. And then you would just anchor it at time 0 is April 5th, 7 BC, which is when Yeshua was likely born. Plus or minus. I'm a math, physics, stats guy. So you got to put plus or minus there. So you just anchor it to a point in time. Set it and say, that is it. There's a plus or minus here, but you move forward with faith. April 5th in the East, does that align with what Joseph said about April 6th? Was Joseph speaking exact or not in that circumstance? The problem with the April 7th or April 5th, 7th BC date is 3rd Nephi 8. But if you look at the data we have, Hiram changed the number. So at some point, did he change the number? How much I'm sorry, not Hiram. Oliver changed the number. He started to write one number and then he crossed it out and wrote a different number. 3rd Nephi 8. What are we supposed to make of that? So this is the n+1 problem. The Book of Mormon is perfect. No, God is perfect. There are errancies in the Bible. There are errancies in the Book of Mormon. But they're all perfect errors, meaning God left them behind as Blue's Clues, or Myra the Explorer, or Myra the Detective, the more modern child's version of this same thought process. God is testing us. Are we capable of restoring the knowledge of Jehovah with the clues he left us? He left more than enough clues. Are we able to gird up our loins and get to work? So I found James Cook in this. Actually, I was reading the 1805 thing, who was born, who died, and I found John Cook, and it confused me with James Cook. So I had to do a quick Google search to clarify that. So where was Hiram at the time that Alvin was doing all this work? You know, it seems like Joseph Sr. and Jr. were pretty lazy, and Alvin was really, they were out chit-chatting with men. I don't know where Hiram was, but it seems like Alvin was always doing the work. So Hiram and his brother got on a boat to cross the, is that the Mississippi there now? And with Joseph, and they were going to head to the Rocky Mountains and escape Dodge. And they get partway across the river, and Joe's like, we're not supposed to go. And so they returned. And so if you look at succession of the church, which is what I think I'd want to conclude on, it's like, why wasn't Brigham at Nauvoo? I'm sorry, at Carthage. Who was at Carthage? John Taylor was at Carthage, but he knew better. He got out of Dodge. He went to England. He got out of town for the whole succession thing because the Danites were roaming. Maybe he didn't want to be DED. Maybe he didn't want to be internally killed rather than killed with stray bullets from a mob. Joseph had guns that day in the jail. I do like the John Taylor's saying, "A poor wayfaring man of grief." That's a really nice song. And so let me finish today by, concluding with an honor to the women. Hiram's wife is going west. One of her oxen gets sick, goes down on a knee, and she's asking the brethren to bless him. And they just laugh at her, like, what? So she did it herself. They wouldn't do it, so she did it herself. And the courage of her to move forward and make the most of life after was amazing. These people lived amazing lives. Just think about the experiences they were able to have, to go through and learn so much. And they had one job to do, which they did, to bring forth the legend of Nephi. And that's where I would want to conclude is, that was the marvelous work and a wonder. With their lips they do honor me, but their hearts are far from me. Joseph, you want to start a church? Knock yourself out. You're going to learn the same thing that all the other churches learn. This concept of a polemic church, that there's only one true and living church. There's only one true and living God. We have to align our energies with the one and true living God. And in doing so, we're going to understand the concept of church is very different than what we have. And I really think a lot about that in the legend of Nephi. It talks about there's only one church, and they're few in number. What does church mean to Nephi? It's not an institution or a congregation. It's a way of living. In South America, they talk about walking in oneness with the jungle. So the Egyptians would go hunting and kill lions and panthers and all the predators. The Hebrews, they wouldn't. They would respect the predator, the carnivore. They wouldn't kill it. The Guarani of South America walk in the jungle. They basically say, if you're getting killed by a jaguar, the black panther or the spotted jaguar, it's because there's not enough food in the wilderness, which you as the steward are not doing your job well. Where do you think they learned that from? From the man. I don't know if his name was Nephi. I'm starting to think it was Naphi. Maybe he called himself Nephi. We don't know a lot about the pronunciations. But I would think once he got to preaching foreigners and you're trying to communicate across languages, Nephi is really hard to say. Naphi just flows. It's very simple in terms of how your mouth has to move. Glory be to God, the Father in heaven, always and forever. May we remember that the kingdom of heaven was built in America by Naphi. May God bless and keep you. Shalom.